And if you look at the history of of mass media, like television in particular, when it first started out, you kind of had to have more sensationalistic things in order to take people away from reality and bring them into this relationship with this abstraction, right? So you had to have, it either had to be news, of like, some war happening someplace, or it had to be, some sort of exciting serial or something like that. But now, since television and the spectacle have been so ingrained into our everyday lives that we don't even need that. Basically, we can just, our reality is so much subsumed by the spectacle that we can just turn on the TV just to watch reality TV, which is people engaging in ordinary everyday activity, like we should be doing instead of watching TV. Du Bois said the spectacle is not a collection of images, but a social relation among people, mediated by images. Now this, to me, sounds a lot like things such as Facebook, or even how we mediate our relationships through a technology, or say in computer games and things like that. People who spend a lot of time on Facebook or play a lot of video games, they think of themselves as having done something really interesting that day. Like, oh, I went and I was doing all this social networking, or oh, I was, battling some orcs or shooting terrorists in an airport or something like that. But really, all they were doing is they were sitting in front of a screen, moving their fingers occasionally. Whereas the capitalist mode of production alienated workers from their product, the spectacle of advanced capitalist societies takes alienation even further into the leisure and social lives of consumers. The authenticity of human life becomes replaced by its image in the spectacle. Advertising no longer sells us a product, it sells us an image of authenticity, an image of ourselves which we live through proxy. Real experience or adventure are replaced by the image of these activities, like in a car commercial or a beer commercial or something. They're not really selling you like on the great taste of the beer or like the superiority of the car. They're selling you on kind of the image that goes along with those particular things. They're like with a fancy, like a new compact cheap car, and they show these hip people driving around in it, having this real hip time going to the beach or something, right? They're saying that this car is you and you should buy this car. With beer commercials, people are really having a fun time and a good time. So they're really selling you the authentic experience, instead of the actual product. And this quote by Larry Law: "Things that were once directly lived are now lived by proxy. Once an experience is taken out of the real world, it becomes a commodity." And basically, another aspect of the spectacle is that it puts society into a passive and receptive role instead of a proactive and creative one, because people themselves don't create the spectacle. The spectacle is created, and then we consume it. And so we're kind of set up into this into a receptive mode in which we just kind of accept everything that's being fed to us. Du Bois argued that later went on to expound that there were three different aspects of the spectacle. There was the concentrated spectacle, which basically channels human desire and concentrates it so that it is identified with a bureaucratic class. Authenticity then is represented in the form of a political leader and kind of creates a cult of personality around them. You see this in fascist countries with Mussolini and Hitler, or in authoritarian socialist countries such with Stalin and Mao or Fidel or even Che. Then there's the diffuse spectacle, which is accomplished through the competition of different spectacles, Coke versus Pepsi, or even more accurately, New Age spirituality versus traditional Christianity and their associated consumer choices, like yoga mats and organic food versus Walmart. The diffuse spectacle gives the illusion of cultural diversity by permeating all of society and entering into niche markets. Du Bois argued that the diffuse spectacle was a lot more effective than the concentrated spectacle. But then he went on to say that there's also the integrated spectacle, which basically combines aspects of the concentrated and diffuse spectacle, market freedom and state control. I would say that is best epitomized by, I don't know, by today, and mostly by like things initiated by the Bush administration and the way they were able to use media to their advantage to promote a state agenda. All right, so this brings us to the next key concept of situationism, which is the situation. The situation is the proposed response to the spectacle and to capitalism in general. Capitalism and the spectacle seek to repress human desire and freedom. So in response to this, the situationists would say we must create situations in which human desires can be realized. As Raoul Venheim said, "Down with a world in which the guarantee that we will not die of starvation has been purchased with the guarantee that we will die of boredom." Play, because it's done for the sheer joy of it and not for its productive value, then becomes a very central concern to the situations. Du Bois said that a revolutionary organization can no longer combat alienation by means of alienated forms of struggle. So in this way, they reject self-sacrifice and say that the means of resistance to capitalism should be enjoyable in and of themselves, that we should do it just for the sheer joy of doing it. A few ways in which they propose to do this are, one concept is the détournement, which is to appropriate aspects of the spectacle for use in a non-spectacular way, in order to disrupt the spectacle and shock people out of their passive receptivity. Examples of this are the book Memoirs by Jorn and Du Bois, where they portrayed the spectacle and then they kind of, they detoured it by juxtaposing it with more creative forms. Another example is a film by René Viennette called "Can Dialectics Break Bricks?", which basically they took an old samurai film and then they dubbed over it in French and completely changed the plot so that it was about the proletariat rising up against the bourgeoisie. And then another interesting example of a détournement is I heard once in a school somewhere on the East Coast during the Cold War, when they were supposed to go out and have a nuclear drill, which was basically just kind of a scare tactic to get people to rally support against the Soviet Union. Some certain students, instead of doing that, went out and got in their bathing suits and got a bunch of suntan things you put around your neck. Don't know what those are called, but in order to say like, hey, we're going to get tanned by this nuclear bomb that's going to hit. Another concept that situationists proposed was the dérive, which is also called the situationist drift. And Du Bois said of these, dérives involve playful, constructive behavior and awareness of psychogeographical effects, and are thus quite different from the classic notions of journey or stroll. In a dérive, one or more persons during a certain period drop their relations, their work and leisure activities, and all other usual motives for movement and action, and let themselves be drawn by the attractions of the terrain and the encounters they find there. As justification for this, Du Bois cites a study where a researcher diagrammed all the movements made in a space of 1 year by a student living in Paris. Basically, he found that her itinerary forms a small triangle with no significant deviations, the three apexes of which are the School of Political Science, her residence, and that of her piano teacher. So basically, her movements were completely motivated and controlled by her role in the capitalist society. So the dérive seeks to replace our understanding of our environment, which is currently dictated by our role in a capitalist society, through the commute, to one created by ourselves for the sheer playful experience of it. He said that for somebody to do this properly, they need to set about a day, and just kind of have no destination in mind except for a possible meeting place at the end of it, and just let themselves be carried through the city.